Have you ever wondered why 82% of cars end up at the scrapyard before they even reach 150,000 miles? Most people blame bad luck, terrible engineering, or planned obsolescence. The truth is much harsher, and it usually sits right behind the steering wheel. It is the driver. Today, we are tearing down the silent killers of vehicle longevity. We are talking about those daily habits you think are perfectly fine, but are actually shaving years off your car's life. But if you apply the rigorous maintenance strategies we are about to discuss, you can easily push your vehicle past 500,000 miles without ever having to pull the cylinder head off the block. This is not magic, and it is not a coincidence. It is just mechanical sympathy, strict discipline, and understanding how these machines actually breathe. Let us get right to the habits that the dealerships really do not want you to know about, starting with one of the most common mistakes people make every single time they park their vehicle. Most drivers pull into a parking spot, immediately slam the automatic shifter into park, and take their foot off the brake pedal. You probably think the transmission is safely locking the car in place. Mechanically speaking, what actually happens inside the gearbox is terrifying. Inside your transmission is a tiny piece of metal called a parking pawl. It is literally about the size of your pinky finger. When you shift directly into park on a hill and release the brake pedal, the entire weight of your vehicle rests entirely on that tiny metal pin. When you come back later and try to pull the shifter out of park, you feel heavy resistance and hear a loud, violent clunk. That is the sound of that pin scraping under immense pressure, desperately trying to release. Over time, this bends the pawl and can even create micro cracks in the expensive transmission casing. The correct method is simple and takes 3 seconds. Stop the car. Keep your right foot on the brake. Shift the transmission into neutral. Pull the parking brake firmly. Now, release your foot brake to let the car settle and transfer its heavy weight directly to the parking brake mechanism. Then, and only then, shift into park. This removes almost 70% of the stress from your transmission. Next, let us talk about your morning routine. For decades, our grandparents told us to let the car idle in the driveway for 10 minutes to warm up before driving. In modern engines, doing this actually causes far more harm than good. Prolonged cold idling causes a rich fuel mixture to wash the critical protective oil film right off the cylinder walls. This raw fuel drips down into the crankcase, dilutes your engine oil, and severely accelerates internal metal wear. The smart way to handle a cold morning is to start the engine and wait just 20 to 30 seconds. That is all the time the oil pump needs to build proper pressure and send fluid up to the valve train. Then, put it in gear and drive away while keeping the RPMs very low. A moving engine under a light load reaches its optimal operating temperature 40% faster. This means cleaner combustion and significantly less wear on your internal components. Speaking of the transmission, it is easily one of the most expensive systems in your car. Yet it is incredibly easy to destroy with sheer impatience. If you are backing out of your driveway and throw the shifter from reverse to drive while the car is still rolling backwards, you are sending massive, destructive shockwaves through the entire drivetrain. These violent micro-impacts tear up the internal synchronizers and severely weaken the gear teeth over time. Transmission rebuilding specialists consistently note that nearly 40% of premature gearbox failures stem directly from this exact rushing habit. Whether you are daily driving a sleek European sedan or managing hauling tasks in a heavy-duty truck, you must always let the wheels come to a complete, dead stop before changing directions. Give the gears a full second to properly engage before you even think about touching the gas pedal. Here is a crucial component almost nobody thinks about, until their engine is violently leaking oil from every single gasket. I am talking about the PCV valve, or the positive crankcase ventilation valve. It is usually a cheap little plastic part that routes harmful, pressurized crankcase gases back into the engine intake to be burned off cleanly. Over time, usually around the 60,000-mile mark, this tiny valve gets completely clogged with thick oil sludge. When it blocks up, the intense air pressure inside the engine block has absolutely nowhere to go. It will eventually find the weakest point, violently blowing out your valve cover gaskets, your rear main seal, or your lower oil pan gasket. Replacing this little valve takes exactly 5 minutes and costs practically nothing. Ignoring it will eventually cost you a massive engine reseal job that is going to drain your wallet entirely. Let us address the biggest lie printed in your owner's manual, which is the massive 15,000 or 20,000 mile oil change interval. Those huge numbers are carefully calculated for ideal, perfect laboratory conditions or continuous, uninterrupted highway cruising. They absolutely do not apply to harsh stop-and-go city traffic. Engines do not typically wear out because they simply get old. They wear out because degraded, exhausted oil stops, protecting the internal metal. Independent oil analyses constantly show that extended intervals increase internal engine wear by up to 40%. If you do short trips, idle heavily in traffic, or live in a dusty climate, you need to change your oil every 5,000 miles. And always, always change the filter at the same time. Leaving a dirty filter in place turns your fresh, expensive synthetic oil into highly abrasive liquid sandpaper within minutes. If you own a high-mileage BMW E46 or a Passat B-Series, you already know that ignoring clean oil is a guaranteed way to destroy complex variable valve timing systems. Overheating does not just happen out of nowhere on a random Tuesday. It is almost always the final dramatic act of a cooling system that has been quietly dying for years. Many people trust the factory sticker that says long life coolant and literally never look at the plastic reservoir ever again. But in the real world, engine coolant turns highly acidic over time. It completely loses its anti-corrosive properties and begins to eat the delicate aluminum components of your engine from the inside out. Neglecting this fluid increases your risk of blowing a head gasket long before you ever see white steam billowing from under the hood. Take a quick visual sample. If the liquid looks brown, muddy, or resembles dirty river water, your engine is in critical danger. Flushing the entire cooling system every 3 to 4 years is the absolute best insurance policy you can buy for the internal metal surfaces of your block. Let us move directly to the combustion chamber. If you are driving a modern direct injection engine, heavy intake valve carbon buildup is a mechanical certainty. Because fuel is now sprayed directly into the combustion cylinder, the back of the intake valves no longer get washed clean by the strong detergents in modern gasoline. Over time, thick, nasty carbon sludge completely chokes the engine's airflow, killing your horsepower and ruining your daily fuel economy. Getting a professional chemical cleaning every 60,000 miles will completely restore the throttle response to factory specifications. Pair this service with a fresh set of high-quality spark plugs. Worn-out plugs do not just hurt your fuel economy. They force your expensive ignition coils to work overtime just to jump the widened gap, leading directly to premature electrical failure. A weak spark also sends unburnt fuel straight down the exhaust pipe, which can easily melt the precious metals inside your catalytic converter. While we are endlessly obsessing over the engine bay, we cannot ignore the raw chassis underneath. If you live anywhere that uses harsh road salt in the winter, or if you live in a coastal town, rust is the ultimate, undefeated car killer. You can have a perfectly running, reliable powertrain, but if your metal subframe rots away into dust, the car is total garbage. People wash the exterior paint religiously, but completely ignore the undercarriage. The secret to a million-mile chassis is getting underneath the car at the end of every winter and thoroughly pressure washing the heavy suspension components, the inside of the wheel wells, and the subframe rails. Applying a heavy fluid film or rust inhibitor every single autumn will create a tough chemical barrier that stops oxygen and moisture from interacting with the raw steel. It is a very messy job, but it is the only permanent way to keep the structural integrity of the car totally intact for decades. Electrical gremlins are the main reason people finally lose their minds and trade in perfectly good cars. A loose ground wire or a heavily corroded battery terminal does a lot more than just cause a frustrating hard start in the morning. Weak electrical current completely scrambles the vital digital signals going to the engine control unit. I have seen angry owners spend anywhere from $140 to $2,800 replacing perfectly good sensors and computers, when the actual fix was taking a wire brush to a chassis ground connection. A simple $1 battery terminal cleaning tool can save you years of diagnostic nightmares. Clean, tight connections also take a massive load off your alternator, extending its mechanical life significantly. You also need to pay close attention to structural vibrations. If you feel a harsh, violent shudder when shifting into gear, or if the steering wheel violently shakes at idle, your rubber engine mounts have likely collapsed entirely. Engine mounts are explicitly designed to absorb the violent rotational forces of a running engine. When the thick rubber in these mounts tears, that raw vibration is transferred directly into the fragile drivetrain. This constantly flexes the exhaust pipes until they rip, throws the drive shaft totally out of alignment, and puts immense, unnecessary stress on the front axles. Ignoring a worn-out mount that might cost $28 today will trigger a massive chain reaction of failing, expensive parts tomorrow. Stopping safely is obviously far more important than going fast, which brings us to brake fluid. Brake fluid is highly hygroscopic, meaning it actively pulls raw moisture right out of the air. Within 2 short years, the water content inside the fluid rises enough to drastically lower its boiling point. If you are driving down a steep mountain pass or have to execute a sudden emergency stop from highway speeds, that trapped water can literally boil inside the hot calipers. Gas is compressible, liquid is not. The moment that fluid boils, your brake pedal drops straight to the floor, and you have absolutely zero stopping power. That exact same moisture also rusts the delicate internal valves inside the ABS module from the inside out. Flush your brake fluid every 2 years, without exception. How you physically use those brakes matters just as much. Hard, aggressive braking spikes the iron rotor temperatures by hundreds of degrees in mere seconds. This severe thermal shock is exactly what physically warps brake rotors and severely glazes brake pads, permanently ruining their stopping friction. Professional drivers use the lift and coast method. Anticipate the traffic lights ahead of you. Take your foot completely off the gas pedal well in advance and let the engine compression naturally slow the heavy car down. This keeps your entire braking system cold and perfectly ready for when you actually need maximum stopping power. It is a much smoother ride, it saves your expensive hardware, and it drastically increases the lifespan of your brake pads. Finally, let us talk about your fuel pump. There is a terrible, common habit of running the gas tank all the way down until the glowing low fuel light comes on. The electric fuel pump sits deep inside the gas tank and uses the surrounding liquid gasoline to constantly cool itself down. When you consistently drive around on empty, the pump is fully exposed to the air inside the tank and runs dangerously hot. Heat is the absolute enemy of all electronics. Keeping your fuel level above a quarter tank at all times ensures the pump stays fully submerged, cold, and perfectly lubricated. Replacing a burnt-out fuel pump is a miserable job that often requires dropping the entire heavy gas tank or tearing up the interior back seat. A $14 fuel filter will not save a pump you cooked by running it totally dry. A proper pump replacement can easily cost you $420 in parts and labor. So do yourself a massive favor and hit the gas station a little earlier. Cars do not just break down randomly. Break down. They finally throw in the towel because they are neglected and constantly abused through bad daily habits. Implementing these strict mechanical strategies is the single greatest return on investment you can possibly make for your vehicle.